Hey, we're live, and
Hey,
Mr. Lee, are you well? Are you
I am well. Yeah, I've not been all that well. Just after Christmas, I got rather nasty virus, and I was in bed for a few days and very tired and stuff. But I've still got a little bit of a cough, but I'm
But
obviously well enough to do this show.
it,
So
it, it wasn't the COVID, was it? So
it wasn't COVID, and I don't
no.
think it was flu either. I didn't really have. It was mainly like feeling ever so tired, and I had this really bad sore throat for a couple of days. But I didn't really have any other flu symptoms, so I think it must have been some other sort of virus. Of course, there's a lot of other, what people don't realise, talk about COVID being a coronavirus. There's a lot of other coronaviruses as well. I think the common cold's a coronavirus as well. It's because it's in the shape of a crown, you see. So it's not, there are other ones around. So it might have been one of them. But anyway,
Michael was the
better now.
first. Hi, Michael. How are you? Spiritual vegans in the house, and the Canadian Vegan Forever. So welcome. And yeah, so if you notice my background, Ronnie, so this is the first of our second series, people. So I'm bricking it, which is so I thought I'd.
I thought you were in prison for a minute, Roger, with that background. I thought, God, they've caught up with him again.
Probably should be. Now we've got a couple of news items to fit in towards the end, but mainly we want to talk about the theme that that Ronnie's going to introduce. But before we do all of that, and Ronnie, you've not seen this, so I'm going
to. I'm weighted with bated.
I know, yeah. You're going to have to do a bit of head bobbing for this one, I think. So, so this is our new theme, Ronnie. Here we go. Is it all over?
That got me bopping. I was pleased to see those were virtual fireworks, not real ones, Roger.
Yes. I looked on the box. It said these are silent fireworks. So yeah. So did you like that? I thought it was quite groovy myself.
Yeah. Nice, groovy, some good photos, and more up to date really as to what we're doing now rather than years and years ago.
All that criminality. So, Ronnie, I was, you know that film that you mentioned last time. What was it? The Groundhog Day, wasn't it?
Groundhog Day,
yeah. So I was looking at the title and I was thinking, now, so what's Ronnie's got in mind this time? It's got to be either Willy Wonka with the golden ticket, or it's got to be those James Bond films. You know, you got the man with the golden gun. And Goldfinger, you mentioned. So
Goldfinger, I hadn't really thought of a film for to kind of compare with this.
So introduce the theme for us, Ronnie. What's it all about?
Well, it's about a quest for the golden vegans, and I'm going to talk all about who the golden vegans are and how really virtually any vegan can be a golden vegan and be a person who's instrumental in kind of inspiring us to animal liberation. But I think, like, before we talk about that, we've got to talk about animal liberation. What do we mean by animal liberation? And certainly, what I mean by it in this context is a widespread situation where other animals are liberated from oppression by humans. Where we have a situation on Earth where animal liberation is widespread. And the human oppression of other animals has ended. That's kind of my what my view is of animal liberation. So, and secondly, right, okay. So how do we get there? Well, we're not going to get there until a large number of ordinary people believe in it. Because while we have a situation at the moment where the vast majority of people don't believe in animal liberation, where the vast majority of people are still speciesists, are still human supremacists, we're never going to achieve the situation of animal liberation. So that means we've got to change the mindsets. We've got to change the attitudes of a large number of ordinary people. And in order to achieve that, we need loads of education. We need a large amount of vegan education, as often as possible, in as many places as possible. So who's going to do it? How are we going to get this to happen? Well, vegan education can only obviously be done by vegans. And the huge problem we have at the moment is that although there's probably an ever-increasing number of people who call themselves vegan, so few of those people.
It sounds like I've got a volume control on you.
That's right. Yeah. I'm kind of running out of steam every so often. I've got my orange juice. So few of those people are involved in actively spreading the vegan message. That's a tragedy, really, because we've got the numbers, we've got the potential, and that potential isn't being realised. And so, if we are going to get this situation where we have widespread vegan education, a lot more vegans need to be involved in it. A lot more vegans need to be involved in it. And so we have to have people who inspire that to happen. There is a lot of vegan education that people can do on their own, solo education, leaving leaflets around, door dropping and stuff like that. Yeah. And really we should all be mindful of that, what we can do just ourselves. But we do need groups of vegans that will do the education. And in order to do that, we need people who will get those groups together and inspire them to action. And so, kind of what I would say to people who are vegan is if you're not a vegan, if you're not a vegan, become vegan first of all. If there's any non-vegans watching this, if you're a vegan but you're not active, get active. Get involved with outreach. Get together with other people and help them with their outreach. If you're an activist already, but you're not an organizer, then do what you can to inspire others. Do what you can to organize things, and think about what you can do in your local area. Because what happens at the moment is with vegan outreach, is so much of it takes place in the centre of big cities. There's like events such as Cuba Truth and We the Free, stuff like that, all those kinds of things. Other events tend to happen in the centre of big cities. That's great, not at all against that, and I think that that's it's a really good thing. But what about all the areas where there's no outreach?
Do you know, Ronnie, I think you're going to regret calling this show Still Alive the way
yes, to be called Half Dead. Yeah, I'm trying to keep going as far as I can between six and orange.
Well, look, you started off with the definition of animal liberation. Do you think there's do you think people are going a bit wobbly on that bit, or is it just a question of how to get to it, which is the issue?
Well, a bit. Well, I think there's a wobbliness in the connection between veganism and animal liberation. I think, sadly, a lot of people think that veganism is just a diet. It's just about avoiding consumption of animal products, and that's really plant-based. Somebody that's just that is really plant-based, not vegan. Veganism is much more than that. It's philosophy of animal liberation. It's opposition to all oppression.
You've got sympathy here from Michael there, Ronnie. I'm loving it, actually, Michael. I mean, this is going to be my show because Ronnie's going to have to.
Well, I'll do my best. I'll try and keep
away a lot more than
it kind of creeps up on you, because I think this is the most I've talked for probably a couple of weeks. So basically, going back to what I said, so. We need vegans everywhere in all localities that will get the other vegans in those localities to get active. We'll form little vegan outreach groups everywhere. Groups is that a word? Groups. And and
That's the
those are
Gollum version.
yeah. And those are the people that I call the golden vegans. The people that says, right, I'm going to get outreach going in my area. And I'm going to recruit other vegans locally, and I'm going to do some outreach. And that might be as simple as just delivering a few leaflets, doing some information stalls. It doesn't have to be big and showy. And in fact, a lot of areas don't lend themselves to big events. You can do some big stuff, and you've got the space in the center of big cities. Smaller places, you haven't do that. You've got to kind of scale what you do according to the geography. But this is it, and it's kind of, and these people are vital because, as I said, nothing happens unless someone organizes it and someone inspires it. And that's true for everything. We look at any change that's ever happened. It's kind of really been down to really quite a small number of people that have driven it forward, to be honest. And there's a saying by Margaret Mead about that, isn't there, Roger? That not quite sure exactly what she said, but it's like that along those lines.
You mean about change? It's the only thing.
Yeah, change is it's always down to like a small number of very committed people. But we need those committed people, those committed vegans everywhere. Inspiring others in their locality to get involved in outreach. And I think unless we get that, we're not going to do it. That's the only way we're going to be able to spread the vegan message far and wide enough to be able to achieve animal liberation. And it isn't like a really complicated or difficult thing, because we have a situation now, I'd say probably in most countries, where there's vegans everywhere, in every town, city. I mean, I live in a sort of medium-sized village, and we've got a few vegans here, just in our village. So vegans are everywhere. So it's just a question of getting together with one or two others and saying, right, what can we do to veganize our local area? What can we do to, put on events and distribute information?
Well, let me ask a question while you rescue what's left of your voice box. But a couple of things. First, I did an interview recently, and I was asked about what was the best thing about being vegan, and I said that until recently, being in the vegan movement felt really good. Because it was like a community and very kind of supportive and stuff. So in terms of the kind of history of the movement as we've understood it within the grassroots, if you like, what's changed in the sense that I seem to remember a lot more organized. You go to an area and the place was like full of organizers. So you go to a regional meeting and there'd be organizers from all the towns and all the cities, but far and wide type of thing. They're all involved with sabbing, but they were much more the way that you want everybody to get back to, in a way. So, I mean, is that accurate, or is that just me being romantic about the past?
I think it may be a bit of both. You see, I think that what used to happen was when there were these regional meetings, and I remember the Animal Rights Coalition, going back to the probably 1990s, maybe into the 2000s, we'd have there'd be regional meetings of the Animal Rights Coalition, and they'd be pretty well attended, but they would attract people from quite a wide area, and so people would come representing various local groups to those meetings. But I'm not sure that was any more groups than we've got now. It
doesn't make sense, though. We've got more communication opportunities now than then, so that doesn't quite make sense to me, in the sense that if that's the kind of thing that was going on, we should be better at it now.
Yes. I mean, we should be better in terms of communication, and I think that kind of that a lot of communication tends to happen over the internet, on social media, and so people feel less need to have these kind of physical gatherings, because that's the only way you could really kind of sort of meet up. But I think now a lot more's done online. People put on an event, and people may go to that event from
Deb actually has asked
perhaps
a
far and
question
wide.
online. Do you think online activism or activity is activism? I mean, I think it is.
I think it depends. I think it can be. I think if I think if you're able to reach non-vegans in terms of vegan outreach, if you're able to reach non-vegans online with the right sort of message, yes, that I'd say that is activism. I think the danger is that kind of very often doesn't happen, and you'll get people in the vegan community who really, most of their friends on social media, their followers or whatever, are vegans themselves, and so a lot of the messages that are put out by those people, maybe the go vegan messages, are just they just fall on the ears or fall on the eyes of other vegans, and so they don't really reach non-vegans. And I think that people, I think people can think that I'm posting all this on social media, I'm doing great activism, when you really analyze it, it's not really hitting the spot. I mean, there are ways around that. One of the things we've done locally in my local vegan group is we do paid advertising on social media, Facebook and Instagram, where you can target the local community with video ads promoting veganism. And so a hell of a lot I've got a couple of cats squabbling here.
It's gonna be your day.
No. and so those, and it's that's been it's been very successful, and the majority of those ads would be seen by non-vegans.
So how do you know that?
Well, I think just the law of averages, because you see, if I was to post something on my Facebook, I know that's going to be 99% of people that see that are vegan are going to be vegans, because that's nearly all my friends are vegans. If you just target a lot of people in the local community with adverts like that, because the majority of people in that community aren't vegan, the majority of the people that see those things won't be vegan either. You see, so it's a way of breaking out the vegan bubble. But obviously it does cost a bit, and it can be a little bit complicated to set up. Anyone wants to do it, I can certainly help them. If they want to do social media advertising, get in touch with me. I can certainly, kind of help them with it, because we've found that it's paid. We did it as a response to COVID and the lockdown, but we've carried on doing it, after that,
after that,
it's been successful.
Let me just say hello to Paul. I'm saying hello to Paul in a wet and windy Galway city from a wet and windy Dublin city, because it's blowing a gale here as well. So, and another related question then, which is, I think this is quite interesting, because it's kind of like, I don't know, social psychology in a way. Have vegans become more separate, which is an odd thing, because it's kind of yes, and yet we've got the internet now, which is confusing.
I think kind of, yeah. I think kind of what happened, if we look at the sort of history of veganism, you go back to say the 1970s, when I became vegan, that it was kind of much more difficult as a vegan to live as a so-called normal person, because that you were kind of excluded from a lot of social activities. It's very difficult to eat out. There were no vegan options, and everywhere cooked stuff in lard and threw animal products into everything. It's very difficult to eat out. With any kind of sort of like food that was anyway processed, it was very difficult to get any vegan versions of even bread. The vast majority of bread wasn't even vegetarian, let alone vegan. Back in the day, so it was quite difficult to operate in so-called normal society as a vegan. So vegans tended to clump together more. We tended to be like outside of ordinary society. live on the edges of society because we weren't really able to kind of,
and that's where the sense of community came from.
And that's where a sense of community, because we kind of banded together, and I think that's one of the reasons why a lot more vegans were activists, because you had to be, to kind of to sort of operate like that, you had to have a kind of toughness about you in a sense, and I think that toughness kind of also led to activism, and I think that's one of the reasons why so many vegans, back then, much higher percentage of vegans back then were activists than are now, where you kind of, because it's so easy to sort of operate within normal society as a vegan, that people don't, that there isn't that kind of grouping together of vegans, like as a separate group from ordinary society. And I think that's kind of got something to do with it as well.
Yeah, it's weird. There's a real irony that Deb is picking up on here, in the sense that we were more together, and yet it was because of our being more a part of society that brought us together in a weird way, wasn't it? And so,
yeah, there was a lot more. You had to meet people in person, really, or you could have chats to people over the telephone, but a lot more of the kind of, planning of stuff and organizing of stuff had to be in person, because we didn't have the internet, we didn't have social media.
What about the structure, the structural aspect of it? For example, you'll remember that the BUAV, British Union for Abolition of Vivisection, but more than them, Animal Aid, they kind of specialised in having local group contacts and and all that kind of stuff. So do you think that kind of encouragement from the centre, if you like, which I've always had a problem with anyway, in a kind of nuanced way, but do you think that's gone now or something? Because I think
I think it kind of has gone a bit, because groups like Animal Aid and Viva, they kind of want people to do things in their local area. They'll have these campaigns where they're encouraging people, can you do I think Viva got one coming up about Costa, Costa, the coffee shop, and some of their milk comes from some place where cows are treated particularly badly or something like that. There's this campaign again.
I'm not quite getting at that though, Ronnie. I'm more getting at the fact that I think that when the national groups were appealing to local people to be active, they were saying to them, you can be active. You don't have to just be a passive supporter, right?
Yes.
Which was always a problem for me. In fact, I think I started my Radicals and Revolutionary podcast by saying that one of the things that really irritated me was there was some leaflets by some national groups which said, help us to help them. And I used to hate that, right?
I know.
But I think then when there was radicalization going on, there was a much more kind of, you can do it and we'll help kind of thing.
I think it was that. And it was also that, like, you can have you have a local group in your area. You organize your own activities and we'll help you, right? Whereas like now it's like, we've got this campaign. Can you take part in this campaign locally? So it's not about like maintaining a continuous group in a locality. It's about people doing their campaign in a local area. So it's not the same thing. It isn't the same thing. And I think that that there's a lot that national groups could do to sort of foster and kind of inspire and help.
Okay, related question. What about the influencers? Because I don't see the influencers saying to people what you're saying. They seem to be more interested in branding, and they seem to be more interested in gaining an audience rather than developing a movement. Is that fair?
Well, it's difficult for me to say, because I don't really watch them. I think I've seen, all I've ever watched, I think, is I've seen 3 videos by Earthling Ed, and those were because they were like factual videos about things.
Well, what about the people in the chat then? I mean, people in the chat are going to know this. Yeah. I mean, do you get them going, you could be doing this too, and even, we can help, or, you know, this is how to start, and this is how to do it. I don't get the feeling that there's that kind of spreading the stuff around type ethos of the movement. It's more, because I was always critical, as you know, Ronnie, of the money of the movement used to be sucked into the center, and some of it would then kind of seep back out and everything. But it's almost as though all the, I don't know, the energy of the movement is being sucked into the influencers now, it seems to me.
Yeah, I mean that could be well be the case, and I'd say, you know, like kind of what I'd like to see influencers doing is saying what I'm saying, is saying to people, look, you know, in your local area, you know, you know, have the concept in your idea of veganizing your local community and doing things in your local community that will turn people vegan. And these are usually very simple things, you know, like, you know, we had, you know, couple of years ago, we had like a fair at our local village hall, where we had, you know, various stalls promoting veganism, for instance, and we frequently deliver leaflets to the whole of the village. And then, you know, in the nearby towns, we do a lot of different stuff as well. And these are only, you know, fairly small towns. It's not a big city area or anything like that. You know, this is community outreach. What we've got to think about is community outreach, not just, you know, this kind of, you know, slap bam wallop kind of type stuff in the center of big cities where you're really kind of appealing to shoppers and tourists. Yeah, it's kind of big, you know, big stuff. But that's all right. I'm not against that, you know, and I don't see that, you know, want that to be replaced. But I think that loads of those people that go into the big cities, they're coming from like a radius of miles around. What about where they live? What about getting together with local vegans where they live and doing community outreach in their local areas? Because a lot of the vegans in our area that do the community outreach, that do the door dropping, maybe help at stalls, they're not the sort of people that would go to the big city and do a cube of truth. They're people that are more sort of locally based, and maybe their lifestyles kind of wouldn't allow them to kind of, you know, go those distances, but they're able to do these, you know, these kind of simpler things locally. And I think there's loads of vegans like that could be recruited to do outreach in local areas.
Well, I just keep going back to, you know, why do they kind of need to be recruited? It's more than
well, they need to, they kind of need to be inspired, you know, like for instance, locally, you know, we have various campaigns of door dropping, and I'll contact people, you know, on Messenger or some other, you know, messaging app, and say, you know, would you like some leaflets to door drop around where you live, you know? And then they'll get back to me. I'll take them the leaflets, and they deliver them. And you know, that's kind of that's like how it operates. Now, if I didn't contact those people, a lot of them wouldn't do it just off their own, you know, just off their own bat. So
yeah, but that's the thing that
and that, you know, there are some that do, and there's some that don't, and yes, that's, you know, that in itself is a problem. I mean, we'd like to see all vegans just doing it themselves, but the next best thing to that is to have someone who will kind of encourage these people, will, you know, give them a G, say, come on, like, you know, how about doing this, how about doing that? Because sadly, you know, a lot of people seem to be like that. You know, they kind of, a lot of people don't do things off their own initiative, and they kind of need to have someone there to encourage and inspire them to do so. And what we need is more of those people to be the inspirers, and more of those people to be the encouragers. And if we had, you know, had one of those people, or one or two of those people in every locality, then we'd be fine, because they would then encourage and inspire other vegans locally to get involved, and we'd be able to do so much more outreach.
Yeah, well, it seems to me that if we were to try and kind of mix and match what was back then and what is now, for example, I mean, I was involved with the Merseyside Animal Rights Committee, it was called. So that was the kind of Liverpool City group. But there was also one in Manchester. But then there were ones in smaller places like Bury and Wigan and those kind of places. And so what would happen now, I think, is that they would be all doing their stuff locally. And then every month or so, they would probably meet, once in Liverpool, then once in Manchester to do a cube, right? But then they would split again to do their normal weekly or daily stuff. Whereas I get the impression now that everybody waits for the cube, almost like this, the central thing, as though the very idea of activism is being kind of redefined to mean only a couple of things now. The save kind of movement, the cube type thing, or the we the free type thing. Whereas what you're saying is no, there's loads of other things too.
Yeah, there's loads of other things, and I think the reason why people are attracted to those things is like the squeakiest wheel gets the oil, because these things, if someone becomes vegan or and wants to become active, or someone's already vegan and they want to become an activist, and they're looking around for how do I get active, and the first thing they see on social media, the most prominent things they see on social media are maybe Cuba Truth or We the Free or Save, and so they go and do that. You see that, and that's how that happens. You see, that's why, because they're new to it. They want to, go along, and that's kind of natural. I remember when I first got involved in hunt sabs, before I formed my own sab group, I went and sabbed for a little while with another group. Learned the ropes, and then I was, did my own group. And so like that's kind of that's kind of why that happens. So I think if we're going to have a situation where we're going to encourage people to kind of, operate more locally, to become somebody who's an inspiration and a local instigator of stuff, then somehow what we're saying here on the show has to gain more prominence, has to be something that more people hear about, has to be something that more people see. So they see this as a way of doing things. It's not just the cube, and it's not just We the Free. That we need to have this community outreach everywhere if we're going to really spread the vegan message properly.
Yeah. Okay. So seems that there's some kind of block to it. I'm wondering. I mean, from the experience, our joint experience that I know about, Ronnie. Maybe it's something to do with money nowadays, and what I mean by that is that we were what you would call full-time activists, but we weren't being paid by anybody to do it because we could get away with.
Well, I mean, we were being paid by the government, weren't we, to do it, really, because we were off benefits.
That's right, but now the idea of being a full-time activist means Patreon and all that, and it still seems to me that you can still have hundreds, if not thousands, of those being supported by the rest. I mean, like I prefer somebody, rather than sending 5 subscriptions off to a national group, is to support 10 people doing local and regional things. I mean, that would be my kind of ideal situation. So it just seems to me that a lot of things that were the building blocks of how I saw. I mean, even things like the single issues, but also sabbing. You see, it was all the same people. The people doing the single issues, the people going sabbing, the people going to the national demos, the people organising the regional stuff, the people going to the grouse shoots, the people going to the hare coursing. These are all, I mean, not entirely, because what you get is, a lot of people go over and do that, and then other people would join them. And this is what you're basically saying, that you could have the thing would kind of split up and join together again with different collections of people, including some people who are not going to go into the center and do a cube, but they're always going to be there for the door dropping and stuff.
Oh yes. I mean, I think it's important that stuff does go on in the centre of big cities. There's a lot of people there, but like, the question is, how do we get that operating everywhere? How do we get outreach everywhere? And so that really means we need people everywhere who will inspire it to happen in their local areas. And a lot of those people are probably the activists that are going into the centre of the cities. And what I'd say to them is, I'm not saying stop, meeting up with the people every so often and doing a big thing in the centre of your nearest city, but think about what you can organise and what you can instigate in the local area where you live as well.
I think that 40-year-old vegan has hit on something important here. In the sense, I think there's a feeling in the modern movement that you almost like have to be an expert like Joey and Ed and all that in order to do this. And so you've got to be trained up and you've got to be semi-professional or something, and you've got to have all the answers. And of course, none of that happened back then. People just got out there and talked, I suppose, and learnt by trial and error. I wonder whether there's this kind of feeling. See, this seems to be a bit different.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with that. I don't disagree with what.
No, I'm not saying that. It's just that in the absence of that, things still happened. So it's not as though people thought, well, I'll have to wait around to be trained before I do anything.
No, I think that was probably the case, that people did act on their own initiative more in the past. But I think, what's been said there is absolutely free, and is absolutely free. I'm saying that because We the Free were mentioned, and I'm sure that is true of We the Free. But you see, you take an example of like the county where I live. We've got about 8 towns in our county. We only have 2 areas of our county. If you split it, say, into parliamentary constituencies, where I think we've got about 7, only 2 of those have any kind of vegan outreach going on in them, and the others have nothing. I think there's one where a guy started to do a bit of door dropping and that, so maybe there's like 3 that have got stuff, but still the majority of towns in the county where I live, there's no outreach takes place. Right. And in order for outreach to take place in those places, all it would need is one person to say, right, I'm going to get outreach going here. I'm going to kind of, go on the local Facebook group, the local vegan Facebook group, and say to people, look, I'm going to do some door dropping. Who's going to come with me? I'm going to set up an information store. Who's going to come with me? That's all it needs. That's all it needs in those areas to get stuff going. It's just one person taking the initiative to say, right, I'm going to get something going here. And who's coming with me? That's all it needs. And yet that hasn't happened, you see. And that's what I'm talking about, that we have so many towns. And, one of those towns is actually a city, it's actually a small city where nothing happens. And then you've got, the bigger cities. What about suburbs of the bigger cities and stuff like that, where, there are communities that, there to be outreached. And this is what I'm saying. We need this everywhere. In order to get this going everywhere, we need the people that I refer to as the golden vegans, the people that will kind of, inspire other vegans locally to do things.
What do you make of this? Pick Me Vegans online saying that vegans should just keep their mouths shut. I mean, we want it to be the way around. It's ironic, given the joke about vegans.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think that there's kind of that people might benefit by spending a bit less time online and a bit more time out in the street, to be quite honest. And I think that's maybe a problem that we've got with the movement, that people think that there's a confusion between being a spectator and being an activist. That somebody will be online and watch loads of videos, related to veganism, related to the oppression of other animals, and somehow think that changes things. But it doesn't. The only thing that changes things is actually like, in terms of vegan outreach anyway, is communicating with other people in one form or another to educate them to go vegan. And
well, I mean, I think just to kind of because obviously, if you're able to do that from an online situation, which is just as effective as actually getting out on the street, first of all, it's a lot easier to do, and also you don't have because in the past, when we've had these kind of themes going, a lot of people saying, well, what you're saying, Ronnie, is dangerous for me. I couldn't do it in my area, and that kind of stuff, right? So I'm always liable, as everybody knows, and we've talked about vegan bubbles, to talk about TikTok. So what we're moving towards doing now is getting this type of activity, in other words, a panel of people, maybe as many as 4, but on TikTok, because the thing about that then is that you're guaranteed to be interacting with members of the public much more than just vegans, right? So that's an advantage straight away. And so then you've just got the issue of that we know on TikTok that people call it a toxic community, and I call it that because it can be very much. At the same time, we do know now that there's a lot of what you might call vegan curious people, even on TikTok. The real problem is getting to them and getting through, letting them get through the trolls to us, and us getting through the trolls to them. And so it seems to me that if we have a kind of panel situation where we're talking amongst ourselves about vegan issues, I think the trolls are going to get bored and go, and it's going to leave much more percentage terms of people who are vegan curious, because that's exactly what happens. Is you get a lot of people coming on, they say bacon though, then they leave, or the mods get rid of them, and then you end up slimming it down to people who will ask questions because they're genuinely interested. But the advantage of that is that they are members of the public, and so so I think that's one way that we can divide this on the kind of bridge this on the street thing or online thing, because online it's vegan bubble, on the street you're dealing with the public, right?
I mean, I think the thing is that yes, I mean, I think online activism can be effective, but it's got to be thought out carefully. And what you've just said is something where you've thought carefully about how do we do this so that we maximize our kind of our ability to educate non-vegans. You've not just gone just posting stuff randomly. You've kind of thought about as a system of doing it, just as we have locally with our advertising, you see. So yes, like, yes, it can be done online, but it's not just a question of just posting any old thing on your Facebook and just hoping that that's going to kind of, where that might work. If someone's is a new vegan and they've still got lots of non-vegan friends, providing they post the right sort of thing on their social media, then yes, they could get through to some of the non-vegans. That could be effective. But people that have been vegans for quite some while, like myself and many other people listening to this, we aren't in this situation where we've got very many non-vegan friends or followers on social media, so we can't use it in that way. But I think the thing is, if you're out there and you're putting leaflets, say, through people's letterboxes, or you're kind of doing an information stall, or you're somehow distributing information out in the real world, then you kind of know that you are reaching a high percentage of non-vegans. You know that for certain. And I'd say yes, I think there are some dodgy areas. I mean, there's some some areas locally where I wouldn't want to go and deliver leaflets, but that's quite rare. Most areas, certainly around here, and I think probably in
some dodgy areas like where you live, is it, Ronnie?
Well, there are some. Yeah, it's 1 or 2 estates where
all those vegans have moved in and ruined the area.
Too keen to kind of go around like delivering leaflets, but that's only a small minority. So there's always somewhere where you can go and do that, and then there's doing stalls at community events and stuff like that, and there's lots of opportunities for for community vegan outreach that that are kind of really that are really very safe, and that you are reaching non-vegans when you do those things.
Yeah, well, I mean, that seems to me great, and it seems to me also great that if we can obviously reach them by going to the street, as it were, but if we can reach them online as well, then we've got it kind of cracked, because the thing to do is avoid the vegan bubbles. And of course, we realize over time, as you say, that you end up just almost like talking to yourself in a way, which is not great. But certainly in terms of what I was saying about TikTok, it's without a doubt that if you spend 2 hours on TikTok, you're going to interact with more members of the public than on the street, without a shadow of a doubt. It's a question, I think, of us trying to think of creative ways to manage that interaction through the technology that we're using, which is not necessarily conducive to it, and it's not necessarily conducive towards social movements. I remember a time, for example, when Facebook was much less friendly towards our type of activity than it is even now. And I think they realized that social movements, or people in social movements, started to use their platforms. And until then, it was all about friends and family and all that. And you know, you were saying about being careful about sharing and stuff. It used to be a lot worse. You share things 3 or 4 times, and suddenly you get a ban. Whereas I think it's loosened now because the technology has learned, as we've learned to use it. They've learned who we are, I think.
Yeah, well, they'll do whatever it gives them the most money, won't they? Really?
Oh yeah, well, obviously, I mean
that. yeah. But anyway, I don't know whether
but, speaking of money, of money.
But I mean, in conclusion, and I mean, this has been a rehash of stuff that I say every show anyway. Really, is that the thing is
we're all totally bored, Ronnie.
Well, what I'd say to people is like kind of, we're in this horrendous situation where, we've got one species on Earth, the humans, that have like, carrying out its oppression of other animals. That's, almost unimaginable in severity and in the horror of it. Right. And we're living in this situation. And so to kind of, to be aware of that, but to live our lives without trying to do our best to end it, it's like kind of, it's a waste of our lives, really. It's a waste of our lives. I came on the earth, I knew this was happening, but I didn't do anything about it. And I spent my time, like pissing my life up against the wall. Do people really want that to be their life, or do they want to, live a life where they're doing their best to change that and their best to make a difference, you see? And if people are vegans, that then they're people that care about animals, people who are opposed to the oppression of other animals. So for those vegans not to want to do their utmost and try to do their utmost to end it, it seems like incongruous to me, and so the importance of kind of being involved in outreach, it's important not just in terms of the other animals that we're seeking to spare from oppression, but it's also important for ourselves in terms of like being able to say to ourselves at the end of the day that we lived a truly worthwhile life and that we didn't waste our time on earth, right? And virtually all vegans can can be activists. It doesn't mean that you're going to do a big shouty thing. You can be an activist just by delivering leaflets, giving out leaflets, help at an impost stall, for instance. And there's no reason why virtually all vegans can't be instigators and can't encourage others.
It doesn't feel like people in the movement believe you. And see, the thing is, it could be that there might be as many activists as there ever was. It's just that there's a lot of other people around us now who are not activists, and so it's not that the activists have gone. It's just that the ones who are, in your terms of the theme today, they were not the golden vegans.
Yeah,
there's more of those in the movement now because we've got a bigger movement of more diverse people, and so I think that it's a mindset problem. We seem to have a leader and follower mindset now, influencer and audience kind of thing, rather than thinking that we're all equal and we can all do it equally.
Yeah, I think there is that problem. I think, to speak in terms of percentages, really, in that, like, obviously back in the day, go back to the 70s and 80s, far fewer vegans, or far fewer people that call themselves vegan, but a much bigger percentage of those people are activists. I mean, of course, the problem in those days was that most of those people weren't, in fact, probably pretty much all of those people weren't active in vegan outreach. They were active in single issue stuff. But now we've got the situation where we've got a lot more vegans, but maybe still just the same number of people that are active. And so the percentage wise,
yeah. I mean, it's what you said at the beginning, is the fact that we do have a fight within the movement, an ideological fight,
yes,
to maintain the fact that veganism isn't a diet. And so that actually cues us into the news items.
Kind of cues into the news items. So, yeah, you know, we're going to get onto the news items. So that's why I say, you know, just kind of wrapping this up, I'd say to people, look, you know, virtually all vegans can be golden vegans. You can all play this like really important part in achieving animal liberation and ending the greatest tyranny that's ever existed on earth. You know, all of us can, you know, get together with local vegans in our areas and you know, encourage those people to get involved with you in doing some outreach. You know, get some vegan leaflets from somewhere, or get some printed yourself. You know, there's all sorts of ways that you can spread the message, and you know, that's why I'd say to people, and if we all do that, all right, you might think it's only a small thing that you're kind of doing locally, but if you add all that up together, if that happened everywhere, we you know, we could really go places.
Is there any evidence that it's effective? That's what's been asked here by Colleen. I mean, like,
well, yes. I know really quite a lot of people that have become vegan because they received a leaflet. In fact, one of the best activists in our local vegan group, she became vegan. In fact, a whole family became vegan after I put a leaflet through a letterbox. So, you know, I've got personal experience of, you know, of that. Yes. People do get.
So they went vegan just to get rid of you, did they, Ronnie?
well. Yeah, maybe some people do. Yeah, I'm vegan now. Bugger off, you know. But no, you know, people have not just become vegan; they become, you know, I know some very good activists that become activists after having read a leaflet. So I think it is. But you know, the same can be said for everything. I mean, the same can be said with stuff online. You know, we're bombarded with stuff online. So how are people going to, you know, kind of pick out the vegan stuff amongst everything else?
It's one of the most difficult things. If I mean, I used to teach methodology, right? In terms of research methodology, working out what works is one of the most difficult things whatsoever. And the research until recently has always conflated vegetarians and vegans, which was a complete major problem for the vegan activists, because you by looking at the stats, even you weren't really looking, or you didn't know what you were looking at, and so it is in any form. It's actually quite difficult to work out what effect you're having until you get the kind of feedback that you're talking about.
Yeah, and you don't often get feedback, and I think one of the reasons you don't often get feedback is because so many vegans are non-active that the only reason I knew that my friend who, you know, went vegan after I put a leaflet through a letterbox, the only reason I knew she went vegan is because she became an activist and said, I want to kind of help and do the same thing. If she just stayed quiet and said, right, I'm just going to go vegan and stay quiet, I'd have never known. And I think this is the thing, because so few people become active.
We the free are trying through their way of monitoring,
yes,
to kind of get around that problem, aren't they, as well?
You see, I can understand that, but you see, I think we know that all of us that are vegan, we went vegan because we received some information, or we received, you know, various forms of information, because sometimes it isn't just one thing, it's a combination of things that caused us to go vegan. And you know, that could have been the printed word, you know, through a leaflet, through an article in a newsletter, a newspaper. It could have been a poster. More these days, you know, more so than in the past, these days, something online, you know, video, something on social media. You know, it's all through receipt of information. And I think the more different forms of information, the more different ways we can put the message out. You look at the advertising industry, and the advertising industry obviously has like done research into this because they spend millions of pounds on it. You see that the same product advertised in all sorts of ways. You see posters advertising that product.
Yeah, that is true.
Adverts on the TV, adverts on social media, adverts on YouTube, for instance.
Yeah.
So they've done their research.
You've got that kind of thing that, in theory, someone like McDonald's shouldn't need to advertise anymore, but they do, and so you've got to keep kind of chipping at it. One form of activism which is fun, especially when you do get a group, but you only need 3 people, 4 people at the most, especially in the summer, is chalking. Chalking is really a fun thing to do, and people come up and they ask questions and stuff and all that, but it's actually a very kind of creative way of doing it. And obviously it doesn't last very long, but it lasts for as long as you're doing it, because people usually do that weird thing of kind of almost like walking around, you know, what you're chalking. You know, so chalking is an interesting one. That would be an interesting kind of alternative to door dropping, perhaps. You know,
it kind of would be. The only thing is, it doesn't convey the same amount of information. You see, it's a limit to how much you can chalk.
And you can't walk away with a paving stone.
Yeah, if you're door dropping, you've got the information on the leaflet, and then you've got a link to a website and stuff like that, so that you convey more information through door drop. That's not. I'm not against chalking.
Well, you can simply get around that by just having an A board with a few leaflets in it, and you got everybody chalking, and people could come and take the leaflets. Yeah, you know, they look at what you're doing.
There's all sorts of you know, there's all sorts of ways, and I think all these things add up. It's just a question of like encouraging more people to do something, and encouraging more people to be the encouragers and to be the instigators. You know, that's vital, and I think, you know, it all comes down to how many of these.
So if we've got a feeling, a final point then, if we've got a feeling that people are kind of waiting to be told stuff by leaders, influencers, national groups, whatever, the structure, the top of the structure, it needs the top of the structure to be saying what you're saying. And I don't get the impression that many people are doing that.
Yeah, I think they do need to be saying what I'm saying. I think it's vital. I think, you know, the only way we're going to do it is by having sufficient outreach, and we're only going to get sufficient outreach by having sufficient number of people doing it. We're only going to get sufficient number of people doing it by having enough people who will encourage those people to do it. And you know, we should all be aiming towards that. We should all be aiming towards a maximization of outreach.
Yeah. See, I don't know the situation with the influencers, and it's probably a pejorative even using that term. I don't know, but certainly if I was one, and I'm not, if I mean, I think we get $40 a month through our Patreon. But if we were getting the kind of Earthling Ed Joey kind of stuff, I would have thought. I mean, what I would do is you'd take the minimum you need, and then you'd spread out all the rest of it around, right?
Yeah. You see, if I had a load of money, what I would do is I'd employ people in different regions to be instigators. I'd employ them and said, right, like, your job is to go to these different areas where there's no vegan outreach, and get in touch with local vegans and help and encourage them to set up outreach groups in those areas. That's what I'd do. And I'd employ as many people as possible. I mean, probably have to be on a regional basis first of all. But if I could employ people even more locally than that, then I would. And that's what I'd do.
I mean, the BYV tried that, didn't they? And I mean, the idea of the BYV in the very early 80s, after the radicalization, was they wanted to get a bus together and make the bus a kind of mobile resource center. I mean, this is before the age of the internet. It's when you couldn't get much printed and stuff. And so they would have printers in there, photocopiers, they'd have letraset, they'd have typewriters, they'd have the stuff of kind of campaigning, and they would take it to people. That was the idea. But the idea is rather than sucking the energy of the movement in, it's giving it out. And I do, you know, to repeat myself, I do feel as though it was more like that then than it is now.
I kind of think it. I kind of think it was. I mean, it could still be. I mean, if all these organisations truly want to see animal liberation, then that's the way to go. They've got to, you know, we've got to we've got to fund and encourage and support the grassroots and encourage vegan outreach everywhere. And I think these days that probably does mean employing people. Or would be better if we could employ people full time in all the different regions to kind of act as those instigators.
Well, there's a lot of people getting wages. It's just that they're all clumped together.
Yeah. I think if we were kind of to look at all the money in the movement and think, well, how can that best be spent, then
well, Ronnie, let's move to this. How much of this could be used to do what you want? Because I brought this up during the animal rights show, and I'd like to bring it up now.
Because it's a.
I don't understand it. I'm really lost here. So this is, for people who don't know, this is as well. It's offering to give the British Prime Minister, who is the richest person in the British Parliament, £1 million to a charity of his choice if he goes vegan for a month. So I think, Ronnie, first of all, we'd have a problem with that premise in the first place, right?
Yes. Well, I've got a couple of problems with it, really. I mean, the reason this has been done is to get publicity. I think the thinking behind this is like, how can we get the most publicity to get the word vegan out there, and hopefully people will go vegan because of this publicity that this has attracted. That's the reason they've done it. That's their kind of thinking. That's their kind of justification for it. All right. Now, my first difficulty with it is, what do they mean, go vegan? Are they talking about go vegan? Or are they just talking about go plant-based? Because you see, veganism isn't just about diet. Veganism is a philosophy of animal liberation. So you're asking Rishi Sunak to go vegan. That doesn't mean that he just, refrains from eating animal products for a month. It would mean he would no longer be able to be Rishi Sunak. Because, so much of what the guy does and so much of what he believes in is fundamental political ideology. It's totally the enemy of animal liberation. Neoliberalism.
This is the British Prime Minister
for the British Prime Minister. Neoliberalism. We've got the most right-wing government here that I can ever remember that steeped in the the concept of neoliberalism, which means that the market rules everything, and that the only real value in anything is what profit can be made out of it, and that includes other animals. That is not consistent with animal liberation. That political economic ideology is totally the enemy of animal liberation. He'd have to give that up.
So
it's not just about diet. He'd have to give up his whole.
No, so this is part of this battle we've got, which is, this is suggesting that veganism is a diet, because they're presumably not saying. In fact, they can't say to this person, go vegan for a month, because he'd have to stop being that person. Right?
He'd have to stop being that person. He'd have to stop being the Conservative Prime Minister. And that's bringing in these laws. Against protesters that are trying to protect the environment. Which in turn, protects, and all that. What's going on?
This campaign is just mind blowing to me. But do you think? This is Generation Vegan, the group name. Now, they used to be called $1 Million Vegan, as far as I understand. And so, do you think that they've changed their name because they don't want to be associated with their previous campaigns? Which, if people don't know, and this is even kind of weirder, is the first thing that they did was offer the Pope €1 million. And when he told them to go away, then they offered $1 million to Donald Trump. Now,
it's
how can Donald Trump go vegan, Ronnie?
Once again, Donald Trump, in order to go vegan, Donald Trump would have to cease being Donald Trump. Every single of his views is totally opposed to the vegan ethic. The same as the Pope, probably, to be honest. I regard religion as one of the major enemies of animal liberation, to be honest. So there's that as well,
What about the kind of alliance politics aspect of this, in the sense that we talk about Britain. This is the British Prime Minister. This is a British setting. on the, presumably that's the Thames.
I think
So,
it is, yeah.
Yeah. So the thing is, Britain is going through an economic collapse at the moment. The people are on strike. There are a large percentage of nurses who a few months ago everyone was clapping because of COVID. They're now having to go to food banks and everything. And the vegan movement is going to give $1 million to a millionaire.
Well, I know that. I mean, that's like, I said earlier, that's like giving me 10p if I'll eat a bowl of parsnips, which isn't my favourite vegetable, isn't it? There you are, Ronnie. 10p if you eat a bowl of parsnips. So 10p for me is about the equivalent of £1 million for him, isn't it? But the other thing, of course, is that, they're not saying they're going to give it to him. Now, if that's going to be given to a charity of his choice, right? I don't know what controls there are over that, but what if he chooses, something like the British Heart Foundation or Cancer Research UK, who fund experiments on other animals?
Maybe
is there any controls over?
Knows the answer to that. Do they have a list of charities?
Well, we don't know. We don't know that. But is that
because it says charity of his choice, doesn't it?
Charity of his choice. But what if he chooses a charity that's involved in the oppression of other animals? You see, this is the problem. These are the two things that are like problematic about this for me. It's like this. Is that go vegan? I mean, they obviously don't mean vegan. They mean plant-based, right? And it's another example of the word vegan being used when it should be plant-based. Plant-based is just about diet. Veganism is a philosophy of animal liberation. It isn't just about diet. The diet is a very important part of it, but it's far wider than that. Right. And so asking Rishi Sunak to go vegan is asking to completely become a different person. It's not just about diet. And then there's a problem with charity. What charity is going to give this money to if he agrees to it, which I can't see him doing. But
I'm assuming, Ronnie, that if somebody from Vegan Generation were here, they're going to say that we can't say go plant-based for a few weeks and then we'll talk to you about veganism, because that makes the story and it's not a soundbite anymore. It's too complicated. Is that what they'd say, you think?
Well, they could say why don't they say eat vegan for our future? In other words, meaning eat a vegan diet. They could have said that instead of go vegan.
Yeah, eat what vegans eat. But yeah, it's just mind-boggling, this to me. In the sense that
it's really the question. You see, they'd say, well, all this extra publicity is like good, and that's going to create more vegans. But that would be what they claim as a positive side. But there's a huge negative side to it as well to be weighed up against that, isn't there?
What about Piers Morgan? If you wanted to get a load of press, you could have offered it to Piers. I mean, I'm getting sucked into this weird idea now, but I mean, if you actually, I mean, why this guy? I mean, the richest.
Well,
MP,
because
he's the prime minister.
It's a publicity stunt, isn't it? And they thought about who is the person.
Yeah, but millions of people would vote against this guy tomorrow if there was a general election.
Well, hopefully they would, but yes, let's hope they would. Get rid of a lot of them. But they probably sat round and they thought, well, who's the one that we're going to get the most publicity from by being the one we name?
Do you think they've also said who is the one who doesn't need the money? I mean, all three of the people that they've tried to give $1 million to don't need $1 million.
I don't think anyone that would, any high-profile person that they could name would probably need the money.
The point is, Ronnie, say this guy goes, yeah, all right, then I'll do it. What happens then? Because are they? I mean, they're not going to kind of sit on his lap, are they, for a month, checking out what he's eating?
Well, no. But even if he said he would do it, he ain't going to go vegan, is he? He's going to eat a vegan diet, which isn't going vegan. Right?
Yeah,
that's the most he's going to do for a month. Now, whether or not,
Josh is saying what a waste of $1 million, but we're talking about vegan outreach in different forms, and I'd have thought $1 million might go quite a long way.
Well, just think, just think what I've just said. right? That is if they are going to give this £1 million away, because they might be hoping that he won't take it up. But yeah, like I've just said, like employing all these people to instigate outreach, to employ people in the regions to find the instigators in the local areas who will then and help them, and be kind of be supportive and stuff like that. How many of those people could you employ for £1 million? Really quite a lot, I would think. For me, that'd be a better use of it. That'd be a better use of. But there seems to be this thing about people desiring the spectacular, people desiring the big publicity hit.
How many people are in Britain? About 70 million.
Yeah, 66, I think, something like that. Yeah.
Okay, so if there's about 70 million, kind of minus the vegans, then all you got to do is get together £840 million a year, and you could just pay everybody $1 million a month.
Pay everyone to go. Yeah, I suppose. Yeah, you could. Yeah. But I mean, there's big question marks over this, as far as I'm concerned. Big question marks over this.
Weird, isn't it?
This whole thing. Yeah.
We wanted to. I'll have to bring it up. We wanted to have a quick look at this, which is a bit odd. I only saw it today. In fact, I think it is today, January the 10th. It is today. So this is hot off the press, people. So this is a news item saying that January is the worst time to ask people to give anything up, and it's not about Veganuary. It's about anything. And I just wondered whether it is a journalist, so I don't know whether there's any research.
Yeah, I mean, they're basically saying that January is like a really miserable month when people need to be, feel miserable. I mean, Christmas has just gone and all that. The New Year's just gone. People feel miserable. It's cold.
Yeah, it's cold. It's bleak. It's miserable.
So you kind of need something to cheer yourself up, and so it's not the time to kind of put further stress on yourself by giving things up. That's the basic gist of the argument in this article. But there is another side to it, and that is that people see kind of psychologically that the new year can be like a fresh start.
Yeah, a new start. Yeah,
a new start. And so this is what Veganuary is based on, and like Veganuary, is very successful. Every year they get more and more people sign up.
I mean, don't quote me on this, but I think it's the case that most people who do, I'm not talking about Veganuary, but most people who do New Year's resolutions, they don't get to the end of the month, do they?
Oh well, I mean, probably not. I kind of really don't know.
See, I mean that was always the bit of Veganuary that really bothered me the most. I think is associating it with New Year's resolutions, because obviously you've got things like February, that kind of idea.
Yeah. I mean, February was a campaign by the dairy industry to
as an answer to Veganuary, but
it was a huge failure. Thankfully.
Would they be? I mean, do you think because of the New Year's resolution bit and the fresh start thing that you just said, that it's going, if they're going to do this at all, if Veganuary is going to happen, it would have to be in Veganuary, in January.
Yeah, I think it would, and I think it's probably the best, the best month for it to happen.
Why can't you have plant-based August every year?
Yeah, I mean there are. I mean, veganism is something that should be promoted all year round, not just in January. But yeah, when people are thinking about, it's a new year, people do think about making changes in the new year. Whether or not they see those changes through is another matter, but they do think about changes. Traditionally, as you say, New Year's resolution. So it does seem fitting that Veganuary would be in January.
Yeah, but do you think that New Year's resolution is that a month-long thing in people's mind, or is it a permanent? I mean, I
think it can be.
I'm going to stop drinking for good or something.
Yeah, I think it can be. It can be like aimed at. I mean, I think Dry January, which was mentioned in the articles where people give up drink. I think that's aimed at you give up drink in January with the idea of like carrying it on permanently, and it's a way of breaking the habit. You're breaking the habit of drink for a month, and having broken that habit, it's maybe you can carry on not drinking afterwards. And it's a similar, veganery is probably a similar thing in terms of animal products.
40-year-old vegan. Should we all move to England? Make the country? Yes, you should do that. And then Generation Vegan will give everybody £1 million.
But what about the other countries? See, it's this thing that people say to me like, "Oh, I would love to live in a vegan community, in a vegan commune. Wouldn't that be great?" And I say, no, it wouldn't be. I wouldn't want to, because I want to be where non-vegans are, so I can educate them to go vegan. Don't want to live in the vegan community. How would I educate anyone to go vegan in the vegan community?
Well, you'd be able to move out of it.
Well, I suppose you could do a hit and run. You could go out to the nearest town,
you wouldn't be chained down, I don't think, Ronnie.
But I think the idea is, we'll just live in this community. We'll cut ourselves off from everyone else, and we'll just be all vegans together. I think that's the idea that some people think would be wonderful. And yeah, there is an appeal to it, but not if you want to turn the world vegan, we've got to go out and about amongst non-vegans, haven't we? If we're going to do that.
Yeah, but you could do that from a vegan community, couldn't you?
Yeah, well, I mean, I live in a vegan household, and I go out and do outreach from vegan households.
Well, you just ruined your own.
You can kind of do it in that way, but not one where you would.
You're arguing against yourself now, Ronnie. What's the matter with you?
We're having no, I'm not. I'm just saying, not one where you say, right, we're cutting ourselves off from the non-vegans entirely. No.
Yeah, but I mean, obviously, it would become a bit cult-like, I suppose. But I mean, you can understand that. I mean, it's difficult being a vegan in a non-vegan world, and especially for people who don't have what, ironically, we did have, which was that community. I mean, there are still a lot of isolated vegans.
Yeah, I think there are. What I'd say is,
England is quite small, right? And I think that So, well, I assumed that you know where I was going. So, if you were to kind of translate that to North America, for example, where people are much more spread out.
Yeah, I think it can be difficult more difficult in other countries where distances are greater. But and especially if people live in country areas, it can be harder. But I'd say for most people, there are other vegans these days living fairly nearby that those people could have communication with.
I wouldn't fancy living in rural Australia, I don't think, in terms of finding more vegans.
Yeah, I think some places, in very rural places, it could be difficult. And, there will be other vegans around, but they might be some distance away, but I'd say, probably in most places these days, there are vegans. And, when someone says that I don't know any other vegans, I kind of tend to think, well, what effort have you made to contact other vegans? Have you gone on social media? Have you gone on your local vegan group, your regional vegan group, or even your national vegan group on social media and asked if there are any other vegans in your area? Because we have a situation now. I mean, there's this one street in the nearest town where there were four different knots of vegans in this one street, and none of them knew one another. They didn't know there were other vegans in the street.
Yeah, well, going back to, I mean, when I started the Hunt Saboteurs, I contacted I contacted headquarters, as it were, and they told me everybody else in the area. But I mean, I don't know whether the national groups even do that. I mean, Animal Aid used to do that. I don't know whether...
they used to do that. I don't think they do that now, and I think that's a shame. And I think that it would be better if, they kind of, that if someone, said
is that a security thing? Is it?
Well, what they did at one time, that they were printing people's home addresses, and that did lead to some problems. So then they started doing it by just saying, in this area, that there are these people, and if you want to contact them, contact us first. Go through us. Right. I think the Hunt Sabs probably do that. They certainly don't publish people's home addresses, I'm sure.
There
was a way of communicating, in a roundabout way, with the local vegan local vegans or the local.
Yeah, but you see, what you're saying there, Ronnie, is what we said during the main body of the show, in the sense that the movement's not even set up now to expand the movement in the way that you're talking about it.
No, and I think what needs to be emphasised, I think there needs to be a re-emphasis of the importance of the grassroots, of the importance of community vegan education, and having the movement set up at all levels to encourage and promote that and help that. It's a realization of, like I said at the beginning, is how are we going to achieve animal liberation? Only through a vast amount of vegan outreach. And how are we going to do that? We're only going to do that by getting that outreach right down into local communities, not just in the centre of big cities. And so if we got everyone on board with that, then everything could be geared towards that objective.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking about you the other day when I was watching, and I don't normally watch this, but it's the kind of annual kind of yearly review from Plant-Based News. I don't normally interact that much with Plant-Based News, but somebody was on about their annual video, and I did watch it. And as far as I remember, there was like one reference to the grassroots, which was a couple of seconds, and I think it was something like a surge march. And then there was kind of hints about grassroots, and then they were showing Earthling Ed and Joey and that kind of stuff. And everything else was corporate. And it was almost like the opposite of what you would want. And that is their kind of review of the vegan year. And there's no emphasis on the grassroots at all there.
But we've just got to keep saying it. We've just got to keep saying what we're saying, just hoping it takes hold. You know, this is a kind of new thing, really, in terms of the phases that the movement's been through. You know, like if we go right back to, you know, pre the 1970s, like certainly here in the UK, probably in other countries, you had national organisations campaigning on single issues. None of those people were vegan, and it was like, write to your MP and send money to us, you know. And then you had the the movement became more militant. You know, the animal rights movement really arose in the 70s, and you know, the movement became more grassroots. A lot more vegans, a lot of people became vegan, but the campaigning really was still on single issues. And it's only perhaps 25 years ago here in the UK when we really had the start of vegan outreach through, you know, some
and it was a slow start as well.
A slow start, you know, some grassroots vegan fairs. You know, some people started to organise and you know, street outreach and stuff like that. It was a slow start, and so you know, this is in the history of the whole history of the animal rights movement, and even more so in the whole history of what you might call the animal protection movement. This is really only quite a recent thing, and this idea really of like community outreach is kind of a new thing. It is a new concept. Because the outreach
it's an old thing for a new generation, isn't it?
Yeah, you know, the outreach we're seeing is like, you know, big city stuff, centre of big city stuff, that kind of thing. And this is another idea. This is about how do we take outreach everywhere, and how do we encourage and inspire people to take outreach everywhere? And so this is yet another, you know, another thing that's like it's related to things in the past, but it is something different.
Yeah, I can see that actually. I think that's a good way of looking at it. This kind of phase thing that we've had the single issues, not many vegans involved, then an increase in vegans within the single issues, and then a big increase in vegans, but a lot of them are not activist. And now what we need to do is bring all that together and end up with a lot more vegans who are active. And so
a lot more vegans who are active, even in simple ways. You know, people.
All I'm saying is that this movement now is not set up to achieve that. I don't think.
No, it's not set up to achieve that, and certainly I'd say that, you know, the finances of the movement need to be used differently in order to achieve that, and that's really important. And really, we need to get everyone on board with this idea. You know, if we could get the national organisations on board with this idea, the importance that, you know, how we're going to achieve animal liberation, isn't that what they want? You know. animal liberation. How do we achieve it? We're not going to achieve it unless we have this massive increase in outreach everywhere, right? So they need to be like really focused on, well, how do we do that? You know, the influencers, you know, the ones on YouTube, you know, that surely they want animal liberation. You know, isn't that what they're, you know, they're about, really, if they're genuine? So
Well,
if they get on board with
I
this
think
idea,
I think on that one, and in relation to what we've said, to be quite honest, I don't think, and I think this is, you know, I mean, in terms of influences big and small, I think most of them don't actually think in terms of the social movement as much as their own individual situation. And I think that's part of the problem, is the fact that I think a lot of people are not thinking in terms of what do I do for the movement, which was our mindset, I suppose. They're thinking about, well, what about my branding? What about my group? What about my, you know, kind of
I think
Instagram, you know, whatever. And I think that is definitely a distinct difference, that they don't think
yeah,
collectively.
I
They
think one
think
of the problems
individually.
is where money gets involved, and where the prime objective of something is to make money rather than anything else. And you kind of see this as well with the national organisations, some of the campaigns they run. You can see that they've launched those particular campaigns because they see that as a money spinner, not that they see that as the best way of bringing about animal liberation. And I think this is the problem, that when the number one aim is to make money, then everything becomes
Yeah,
secondary to
well,
that.
I think I'd agree with that, because I mean, we've had this conversation before, and some of it privately, in the sense that when we look back, and obviously the press office colours all this, but when we look back, and if I think about the people that we worked with back then, I don't know anybody who kind of wanted to be famous, and I didn't know anybody who wanted for the movement to make them rich.
No,
I don't think that crossed
no, not at all.
our minds. I mean, it obviously would be quite good to be comfortable, but the idea of being very kind of affluent wasn't part of it. You would kind of take what you need and give the rest away because you had the movement in mind.
Yeah, I think you know, we'd have loved to have a lot of money, but not for ourselves. You know,
Yeah, that's what I'm
to
saying.
be able
And
to finance.
if we did get a lot of money, we'd give it away.
But well, yeah, absolutely. You know, I mean, like an example. I mean, the small amount of money we have in our household, because we weren't spending so much during, you know, during COVID and stuff. We gave lots of that away to, you know, sanctuaries and different things, you know, that needed it.
Yeah.
It's, you know, the thing is, it's like the idea that having loads of money makes you happy is nonsense. You need
Yeah,
enough,
well,
obviously. But
I'd say one ironic thing about my life is that because of my activist orientation of my life, which has been all the way through, is I used to teach the sociology of poverty. And I think I was probably the only one in poverty in the classroom, because I've always been, if you look at the actual definition of poverty, I've always been in it, because I've never been interested in gathering money.
no. I mean, I've probably always been in it as well, to be quite honest.
Yeah.
But these it's not important in life, you know. Like I said, that, you know, what is the true conditions of existence on this planet? You know, true conditions of existence, you said many times before, is that we've got this one species that horrendously oppresses all the other, you know, sentient life forms that live here, and that is that is basically a problem that overwhelms pretty much everything else, you know. And this is like, you know, if we're not doing our utmost to combat that, then what the, you know, what the hell are we doing? You know, and that
Indeed.
doesn't mean, you know, so having an interest in getting rich and, you know, material things and that, it's a nonsense, isn't it? You know, the only reason to accumulate any money is if it can be somehow used to, you know, in that struggle.
Yeah, I reckon. So look, we've been doing for 90 minutes, and you're well done for your voice lasting, Ronnie. At first,
It
I
kind of,
thought,
I thought, I didn't think it'd last so long. It kind of seemed to get better for some reason.
yeah, kind of,
Yeah,
kind of,
I was worried at the beginning I wouldn't be able to make it through, but
yeah, I was a bit worried about that. I was
Yeah.
thinking, now what can I say for the next 50? You know,
I
so,
know. But like, hopefully people have take on board, what's been said, and people listening do what they can to stimulate outreach in their local areas, and people listening to the sharing of it will do the same. This is vitally important. Anyone listening to this who's vegan is, obviously fundamentally wants animal liberation. So let's do what's necessary to achieve it.
let's do that indeed. Now I'm going to indulge myself and play our intro as an outro. I must actually put together an outro, but for now, I'm just going to play the intro again because it was the first time you saw it about an hour ago. Well, 90 minutes ago, Ronnie. And so, yeah. So people, thank you so much for the comments have been great today. Really, really, really interesting. I've been following them along, and people giving each other advice and asking, each other as well as us really good questions. So yeah, thank you very much for all that. And so we're aiming to be back next week, Ronnie.
Yes. Yeah. Same time, same place. Yep.
Look out for 2 coffins on your screen.
Yeah. What was that thing? It wasn't the cough that carried him off, but the coffin they carried him off in. Have you heard that one before?
Yeah, that could have been.
I don't know what that. Don't make any sense, does it? There we are.
Yeah. Whoever came up with that must have got a Nobel Prize. So, people, thank you and goodbye.
Thank you, everyone. See you soon.
We'll have to have the countdown again. I'm sorry about that.
Okay.
But there you go.